Welcome everyone. I am gonna go ahead and start now before the time keeps passing. Welcome to our panelists and our participants. We're really happy to have you here today. So today's expert webinar is being marking the occasion of the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. And the theme for this year is addressing inequalities for a resilient future. And we wanted to focus particularly on early warning systems and how we can then address inequalities through them. Usually we hold these experts webinars close to our WRD Experts, which is a Women's Resilience to Disasters expert group. And it's usually a knowledge sharing opportunity, but because of this year's time and because of this year's theme for International Day for DRR, we thought we would open it up for more people to attend. So we're really happy to be here. Just noting that this webinar is being recorded, and please let us know if that's not okay with you. And with no further ado, I will hand over to Rahel to give us some opening remarks before we get started.
Thank you so much, Maria. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rahel Steinbach, and I'm leading UN Women's disaster risk reduction work, and in that context, also heading the Women's Resilience to Disasters program of UN Women, which is supported by Australia. So, welcome, first of all, to our webinar today on effective and inclusive early warning systems. It's a webinar which we are pleased to co-organize with our distinguished colleagues from WMO and UCL at the occasion of International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. And as you all probably know, this year's theme is addressing inequalities for a resilient future. And as we were discussing in our team, what we could really look at when it comes to this broader theme, we thought that the importance of effective and inclusive early warning systems is really quite critical and has also received a lot of attention over the last months since it was launched last year. We're talking about early warnings for all. So we felt that this might be of particular interest for our experts and those who are joining us today. So obviously we live in times where our ability to anticipate, prevent, and respond to crises is becoming more and more vital. And as a gender and DRR community, we know that ensuring women's leadership and voices and that of the broader LGBTIQ+ community as well is critical and can be life-saving, but not everyone is aware of this. And so we need to be strong advocates on the topic and really help increase knowledge and practice on gender-responsive DRR wherever we can, but also really meaningfully explain what gender-responsive disaster risk reduction actually is. One of the areas is inclusive and gender-responsive early warning systems. In this context, our speakers today will discuss the means of empowering women and girls in all their diversity, as well as the broader LGBTIQ+ community, and all those in marginalized and vulnerable situations to leverage their abilities and potential, meet their needs and priorities, and participate meaningfully in decision-making on disaster and climate risk governance. Our conversation today will also examine potential entry points and linkages with the ongoing development of the Gender Action Plan for the Sendai Framework. Many of you are engaged in this currently, and thank you to everyone who has contributed for your inputs. We are currently working on the second draft. And this Gender Action Plan aims to target significant gender gaps in the implementation, of course, of the Sendai frameworks that undermine our collective resilience to climate and disaster risk and impacts, and it includes a focus on early warning systems. Our expert webinars, as Maria already mentioned, are part of the Women's Resilience to Disasters program supported by Australia. And as part of this program, we seek to increase the voice of women and girls, but also that of the LGBTIQ+ community for more inclusive and gender responsive early warning systems and more effective disaster risk reduction overall. And in this context, the importance of advocacy and knowledge sharing is, of course, critical. And that is also what we are attempting to do through these webinars and generally the trainings that we undertake. So let me close by thanking all of you for being here. I hope we are going to have really excellent exchanges and discussions today. And let's dive into the presentations and discussions right away. Thank you. And back to Maria.
Thank you, Rahel. I'm just going to go briefly over the agenda so we know what we're doing before I hand over to our first presentation. So the first presentation is on research on inclusive early warning systems, which is being carried out by Dr. Carina Fearnley and Professor Ilan Kelman from UCL's Warning Research Center. Carina is the director and founder, and Ilan is the deputy director. And then we're going to have a presentation on the Early Warnings for All initiative and its gender integration by Erica Allis, who's the head of partnerships at the World Meteorological Organization. And we are waiting for Katrien van der Heyden, who is an expert in climate change and gender responsive work, and is currently working in Oxfam, Belgium. And she's going to talk about some specific examples of early warning systems at the European Commission. And then we're going to briefly talk about the development of the Gender Action Plan in the context of integration with the early warning systems. And then we're going to have a brief discussion. So that is our agenda today. And now I'm going to hand over to Carina and Ilan for their presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, team. Thank you very much to UN Women and to the network, the Women's Resilience to Disasters Network, for inviting us to speak today. So happy International Disaster Risk Reduction Day, if we can say such a thing. Obviously, the theme this week is a particularly this year, sorry, is a very important one. And so what I wanted to do was just to start off by sharing some thoughts about what and how can we now enhance inclusivity in warnings. So first of all, let's start off with what is an inclusivity and why is it important? Well, it's important because we know, we've seen evidence that inclusivity saves lives, it preserves livelihoods, and it enables long-term resilience and the ability to grow and prosper despite quite significant interruptions through disaster events. And this, of course, means that we need to include everyone in the process. And to do that, that means we have to include everyone. And I've got a list here of all the different lists of people who might be somewhat marginalised, whether that's based on your sex or gender, which we're sort of focusing a little bit on today, but also your religion, your languages, your communication forms, and also the situation that you're in, whether you're actually homeless, an asylum seeker, or whether you're in a prison, for example. So it's really important that when we're having inclusivity, we need to make sure we have those approaches in place that enable people to have their needs met. And I like this cartoon that's from our recent conference, which sort of says, welcome all, this safe hostage from the incoming tsunami. But of course, it's not actually accessible to most of the people in that picture. So we recently researched and wrote a report with GFDRR and the World Bank that looked at how can we actually design inclusive warning systems. And so we looked at various literature review, both grey and academically published and reports. And we did a number of interviews and consultation with World Bank staff, as well as other academics, NGOs and private sector individuals. The report is the result of this. And I think, what is not surprising in a way is that key elements have to include it being people-centred, that inclusivity needs to be people-centred, multi-hazard, so we're looking at multi-hazard early warning systems, potentially impact-based as well, that they need to be integrated and intersectional. So what does this all mean, and how can we actually work with this? So this is a wonderful quote here by Mary Parker Follett, who says, unity, not uniformity, must be our aim. We attain unity only through variety, and differences must be integrated, not annihilated or not absorbed. And it's interesting because I've deliberately put this picture up because obviously the global survey report on persons with disabilities and disasters has been launched as part of the day of DRR. And as part of that, and as part of the Sendai framework midterm stock take, has been that very little progress has been made over recent years, despite lots of efforts and lots of attention and lots of goodwill and lots of investment. And the process of making our warning systems and our disaster risk reduction inclusive is not quite getting there. So I guess what I'm going to try and do in the next few slides is perhaps illustrate how we can actually do that. So in order to create integration and inclusion, we have to work beyond a single inclusivity type. And that means working across intersectional needs. So you might have an individual, for example, who's from a minority group, who has an invisible disability like severe autism, but also has to use a wheelchair. And so that makes it very challenging in terms of being able to understand how we can reach that person in time for them to be able to respond to a warning, take action, and all the sort of preparedness and response and mitigative actions that they need. And then on top of that, we've got all these other factors around inclusivity, which include languages and translation, interpretations, cultural understandings of different words and framings, cognition, balancing the information that we have, and of course the issue around near misses and false alarms, which can really impact inclusivity. So in order to generate inclusive warnings, what we say is three key things, which is to give everyone a voice to act on a warning and for a warning, to learn from each other and to work together by overcoming the silos and territorialism. And part of that means using better data, securing warning longevity, breaking down the silos, and providing a connected warning system. So how do we do that? Well, this is a table from the report, which I'm not going to go through in detail, but here it just shows that we have looked at the 4 different elements of a warning system as characterized by the UNDRR, and we have put here the various entry points that we feel are key to being able to make difference. So if you want to read more, have a look at the report, and we state these specific entry points on these 4 different elements of the warning system and what actions and interventions can actually be done in order to do that. But of course, we also want to flag that it's not just about the 4 elements of disaster risk reduction, knowledge, detection, dissemination and communication and preparedness, as we can see from the 4 elements of the early warning elements here. And it's not just about multiple users or hazards or integrated warning systems. It's about how these all link together and the relationships between them. And in a sense, that's why, we want to propose a 5th element that really kind of flags that, yes, we need these 4 elements in place, but we also need to have this 5th core element that enables integrated stakeholder and expert engagement, joined up planning, good governance, and people-centered approaches that enable that bespoke ability to deal with the very specific requirements of some individuals. So how can we implement this? Well, we need to build on existing resources. We can't, do fancy new things. There's not the resources to do that. So by embedding warnings as part of a long-term social process, making sure that we use multiple channels and modes that obviously have to be credible, transparent and believable. They have to be relevant to everyone, so that's the inclusive element there. And also connecting from all different levels of governance and working across a number of different hazards, often in a sort of multi-hazard situation or a cascading situation. And working beyond just dissemination of warnings to all the preparedness, prevention, early action, mitigation and response. And also trying to reduce those inequalities and equities despite the hazard. So I just wanted to summarise with just a couple of examples to give a sort of a bit of a flag that actually a lot of work is being done. And this case study from the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project in India is just a very great example of where we are seeing a greater understanding of individual and collective risk, but particularly trying to address the gender issue. And so here we're seeing women who have been empowered by being representing on local governance committees, working with the local authorities, being able to represent the needs of women and children. Also conducting drills and including everyone as part of that process, and also working with the community to identify what the risks are and the management that may be most suitable with the resources available. Another example is just from Bangladesh, where we can see here an amazing cyclone shelter. So it's all very well getting a warning about a cyclone, but if there's nowhere to go and get into a shelter, then it's a bit futile. So we've seen lots of wonderful shelters that have been designed, and they've been designed with gender in mind many times, you know, especially if from countries that have a large population of Muslims, to sort of have separate quarters or spaces for different genders. But in this case, I just wanted to highlight how warnings really do relate to the sustainability development goals as well, in the sense that this cyclone shelter was not just only built for a cyclone, not only built to access for people with those with disabilities, but it also has a school and a medical centre in it. And so therefore it's used every day as part of the local community, bringing benefit to the children and to the families there. They know where the cyclone is, they use that space. And it means that should they evacuate, they know where to go, they can access it, and they can keep functioning as a society post that event. So a really great example there. So some essential actions to include, enhance inclusive warnings are making sure that we engage our diverse communities and stakeholders from the beginning of the process. This is the first mile, which Ilan will be building on. Integrating iteration and adaptive learning. We need to make sure that we are creating that ongoing adaptive warning processes that's embedded in everybody's everyday life. And we also need to support those initiatives and activities that create this enabling environment where we can share good practices, entry points, and comparable data. So if you want to learn more about the report, we have the report online on our website. We've also got a 2-page briefing note about inclusive warnings, and we also have a seminar of the launch event from that report as well, if you wanted to see a separate presentation. But I will now hand over to Ilan.
Well, thank you so much, Carina. What a wonderful introduction. I will not be using slides, but for the people who are here, I've put my contact details into the chat. And for those watching it later, please just do a search on my name and connect so that we can learn, so that we can understand. The key is what Carina said: learning, exchanging. Warnings are a process, a social process. And this process means the 3 key words beginning with I, which Carina mentioned: intersectional, integrated, inclusive, basically the 3 I's, not I, but we together. Because as Carina alluded to, the process of warnings means the first mile. We hear so much about the last mile. Let's set up the warning system and then connect with the people who use it. That's the antithesis of what inclusive, integrated, and intersectional means. Instead, start with the people. Yes, we need the leaders on board, but leaders often don't represent their people. They are often men. They are often from the majority. We can take a specific example that for tsunami warnings, it actually really helps to connect with fishers. They know the ocean. They know the coast. They are often men. They are often running the community. But the women who will typically take the catch and prepare it are staying at home. They understand the weather. They understand the local context. So we need to connect with women and men, bring them together, combine their knowledges, integrate it so that they respect each other and understand each other in order to have a full tsunami or storm surge warning. Similarly, we hear a lot about end-to-end warnings. That makes the assumption that we start somewhere, we go through it, and we end somewhere. But where do we start and with whom? Where do we end and with whom? Instead, it should actually be a process. As Carina said, integrated, feedback, loops, connection, always learning, always adapting. This means it's end to end to end to end to end to, or node to node to node, or connection to connection to connection. We consider, for example, as one example, I've seen earthquake warning education in which all the men are involved in the town center to look at displays of what happens in an earthquake and how to deal with it. And, you know, that's fine. They can go back to their wives and their sisters and their daughters and their grandmothers and explain. But why just involve the men? The wives and the sisters and the granddaughters and the other women are perfectly capable of being in the town center themselves and learning. Again, we all have different perspectives. We all need to respect, learn from each other without being the same, but simply including, integrating, and intersecting. Which means another key phrase we often hear, early warning systems, but moving beyond early. Late warning systems, medium warning systems, super early warning systems, like we've had 50 years of warning of human-caused climate change. And also recognizing that everything is a system. So system is just sort of a buzzword, which is why we call it the Warning Research Center rather than the Warning System Research Center or Early Warning System Research Center. An example, tornadoes in the US. What they found is that the shorter the lead time, the more casualties, but also the longer the lead time, the more casualties. And there was actually an optimum of about 18 to 20 minutes at the moment, subject to change, 18 to 20 minutes, which minimize casualties. Part of the explanation might be that the shelters are not that comfortable. So people would go into a shelter, they're sort of waiting for the tornado. And then after 20, 30, 40 minutes, they go out and then the tornado hits. So we have to be attuned to different time frames and thinking about integrating all time frames for warnings, not just early warnings. So inclusivity, thinking about all these responses, all these issues, even looking at the people here today as panelists and audience. Do we think there is a bias in the gender, and how can we integrate many more people? Because we know it is not the myth that women are more vulnerable than men. It is not the myth that people with disabilities are more vulnerable than others. It is that women and people with disabilities and others are made to be more vulnerable by the majority. And making people vulnerable is unacceptable. Instead, all of us together using our privilege, using who we are and intersecting with others, need to make everyone resilient so that warnings serve everyone as a societal process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilan and Carina. That was a very insightful presentation indeed. And I'm looking forward to the discussion when we have some questions or some more time to talk about it. I'm now going to hand over to Erica Allis from WMO to give a presentation on the Early Warnings for All initiative.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Hold on a second. So thank you very much, colleagues. Are you seeing the screen that is the presentation mode or?
Presentation mode.
Okay, hold on just a second. Apologies for this. So hopefully it comes up soon. How is that? Okay. Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Many thanks to the organizers for having me and for the invitation. It's a pleasure to work with colleagues here on this important topic. As many of you know, this past year has really devastated many communities, and we've shattered a lot of records in terms of temperatures, and we've had a lot of devastating events around fire and floods, most recently in Libya. And I think it's important to note that poverty and inequality really kind of compound the impacts of these events. And so it's really a pleasure to work with my colleagues at IDDRR and also UN Women to transition more towards a people-centered approach in terms of early warnings. I think it's really important to note that behind all of these events, there have really been unspeakable impacts to communities and people in terms of children being out of school, death, and really a loss of livelihood opportunities. So I think it's really important that we keep that in mind whenever we talk about this this particular topic. And I think many of you know that the science is really clear in terms of the trajectory that we're on in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and the fact that we are really off track in terms of reining those emissions in. And unfortunately, we can expect to have more and more extreme events into the future. For those of you that are not familiar with the World Meteorological Organization, we are a specialized UN agency on weather, climate, and water. We have 193 members, and our headquarters is in Geneva. We actually predate the formation of the UN itself. So we've existed for since 1873, really to promote the international exchange of weather, climate, and water data that feeds the global models that enable warnings and forecasts and warnings. We coordinate the work of over 300,000 national experts from meteorological and hydrological services, and we also work with academia in the private sector. We're the co-founder and host agency for IPCC, and we have a number of research programs such as WWRP and WCRP. And we also host a number of funding mechanisms that actually support LDCs and SIDS in advancing their multi-hazard early warning systems. So these are primarily the cruise and soft secretariats, but we're pleased with the growing engagement that we have with the Green Climate Fund. As was already alluded, in 2022, the UN Secretary General Guterres announced a new initiative that would ensure that every person on Earth is protected by early warning systems within 5 years. The action plan was developed and launched at COP last year, and at the beginning of 2023, we really started our activities on this initiative. And I think it's important to note that it is really a people-centered approach that we're taking, and the fact that we're looking to protect everyone on Earth is really kind of emphasizing the need to connect to social safety nets and anticipatory action plans to enable this protection. So the plan itself, and I'll drop the plan, the executive action plan into the chat, but the plan itself is structured around the 4 pillars, so to speak, of multi-hazard early warning systems. So there's disaster risk knowledge, pillar 1, and this is being led by UNDRR. WMO is leading on pillar 2. This is detection, observations, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of hazards. And then pillar 3 is being led by our colleagues at ITU. And the IFRC is leading on pillar 4, which is preparedness and response capabilities. I think it's important to note also that it's not just pillars operating in isolation. We're really looking and coordinating very actively across the pillars. And also a larger constellation of partners. So we're pleased to be engaged with UN Women on this, and they're contributing primarily to Pillar 3 at the moment, but we hope to have more engagement of theirs in Pillar 4 and also Pillar 1. But this is just to emphasize that it's really kind of an approach, an initiative that is looking to come to and support countries in a holistic approach at the country level, but also working with regional specialized centers, which WMO has a number of those, along with training centers. So this kind of speaks to the approach that we've taken. We have interpillar technical coordination, in which we convene a network of partners. We've developed a number of joint tools and guidance materials to support our regional offices in rolling out and having engagement within the governments to roll out the initiative, and working primarily with the IFRC through their network of volunteers to kind of also meet this with the bottom-up approach. And we're also supporting the programming of country work. So we've really taken a programmatic approach. We have a 5-year implementation plan. We have 18-month budgeted work plans, and we have the interpillar toolkit. So in terms of the toolkit that is available to countries, we have provided a minimum core capability checklist for conducting the gap analysis. This kind of serves as the mechanism for identifying key priorities that countries may wish to focus on to have more effective multi-hazard early warning systems, especially from a people-centered approach. We provide the terms of reference for a national stakeholder coordination mechanism that would enable bringing together civil society, a number of different actors at the national level, recognizing that this landscape looks very different depending on the country that we're operating in. And then also a template for the national roadmap. So just kind of, if they need help, if there's not already an existing plan in place, kind of bringing these different components together, we provide a template to kind of help get them started. And then in terms of the rollout in countries, there's a stakeholder mapping template. We're normally supporting the national consultation workshops from Geneva and also our regional offices, and advancing the gap analysis and looking at how we can not only just develop a roadmap, but actually resource it. So as I mentioned, we have funding mechanisms such as CRUISE and SOF, and we're really pleased with the recent announcement at the Climate Ambition Summit that multilateral development banks are aligning with the initiative. So we're really looking at how we harness these resources to provide effective early warning services. This is just a kind of a schedule of some of the recent activities that we've had in countries. So we have about 5 or 6 national consultations that have been conducted so far, and pretty soon we're going to have a learning exercise, just kind of cataloging what's worked well and across these different workshops at the national level, and seeing some of the similarities and how we might effectively mobilize support to the priorities that are identified at the country level. And we have a number of these workshops also coming up in the near future. In terms of the recent past, maybe notable activities and some notable activities coming up at World Congress, at WMO World Congress in May and June earlier this year. We actually accorded the Early Warnings for All initiative as the highest priority in WMO's strategic plan. So this just to say that we really intend to support this initiative in the coming financial period, and have provided resources to support our engagement within our member states. And we've also leveraged the WMO technical commissions to provide structured support to the Early Warnings for All in terms of guidance and guidance and training materials to enhance capacity. And I'm pleased to promote the engagement that we've had with UN Women through the WMO Services Commission. So we'll be hosting the third CIRCOM meeting in Bali, Indonesia next year, the 4th to the 9th of March. And we have a dedicated Gender Action Day on the 8th of March. And through this, we're actually developing a women's leadership training curriculum. And we have a professional that's going to be providing actually one-on-one support in terms of leadership coaching. And we're going to soon be announcing a call for good practice in gender responsive service delivery, especially around multi-hazard early warning services. And as a key outcome of this conference or this meeting, we'll have the intergovernmental approved gender action plan for the WMO Services Commission and a revised WMO gender equality policy, or at least a proposal for that would be presented to the next Congress. So that's really my presentation, but I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. That was very useful and full of information. I think Katrien, unfortunately, is not able to join us today because of some technical issues. So I'm just going to hand over to my colleague, Priyanka Tilak, who's a program specialist, IDDRR program specialist at UN Women. And she's going to speak about the Gender Action Plan and potential entry points for the early warning systems.
Thanks, Maria, and hello again to everyone. My name is Priyanka Tilak, and I'd like to thank you all again for joining us today on a Friday to discuss this very important issue. And unfortunately, Katrien, who is to join us to give some examples of early warning systems that she has been working on with the European Commission, is not able to join, but we hope we'll be able to share her presentation along with the recording of this session afterward. So as Maria mentioned earlier, usually the topic of the WRD expert webinars is determined by the experts themselves, but today's session is a bit of a special case. Our team has been engaging these last months in the development of a gender action plan for the Sendai framework, along with UNDRR and UNFPA. And we've now proceeded through 2 of 3 rounds of consultations with member states, civil society organizations, and also with our sister agencies across the UN system. And throughout these consultations, we've been seeing a few issues that have been emerging strongly as priorities for targeted and collective action in terms of addressing those gender gaps in the implementation of the Sendai framework. And these issues will be no surprise to many of you working in this area. They include sex, age, and disability disaggregated data or the lack of such data, the need for greater gender expertise, for capacity building, for knowledge sharing and networks, and other means of supporting the scaling up of the work that is already being done by women and girls that are currently facing the brunt of disaster and climate risks and impacts. And in that context, gender responsive and inclusive early warnings came out as a major priority in the discussions around priority number 4 of the Sendai framework, which focuses on enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better. And one of the 2 gender action plan objectives under this priority that we developed is specifically around preparing for inclusive early warning and gender responsive recovery. So I'd like to share with you all just a few of the specific actions that were up for discussion in the last round of consultations under this area, which include, for example, mainstreaming gender and intersectional issues throughout the development of early warning systems, ensuring that women's organizations, particularly Indigenous communities or organizations at the community level, are able to meaningfully engage and integrate their knowledge throughout the development and implementation of early warning systems, which our UCL colleagues mentioned as well in their presentation. As a way of enabling this connection, there's another action on creating stronger coordination and collaboration between the ministries engaged in developing early warning systems and local women leaders, women and gender organizations, in particular to tap into their solutions, their insights, and their innovations. And then there's also an action around designing risk communication with a gender approach, a gender inclusive approach. in order to develop messages that are accessible to all in terms of reach and comprehension. So these are some of the actions that were up for discussion in the last round of consultations. So they may still evolve further depending on the feedback received. But I would really strongly invite all of you to share any best practices that you have with us in relation to these actions. Share networks that may already be working on some of these issues, on implementing some of these issues. Anything else that you think would be useful as guidance or support for the actors who will be in a position to implement these actions. For example, some of the questions that we got from the consultations were around some of the terms that what some of these terms look like in practice. For example, what does inclusivity actually mean in terms of an early warning system? What does an intersectional approach mean in practice when it comes to developing and implementing these systems, for example? And we had some great examples exactly from the NDMO in Tonga, for example. The head of the NDMO agency joined us to explain how they had managed to build really strong collaboration at the community level, which generated a lot of that information that they needed to be able to create more inclusive early warning systems. And then it also led to illuminating certain issues that they may not have immediately considered. For example, those who are hard of hearing, how do they have access? How are they covered by these early warning systems that they did not yet have an answer to? And we're looking for support from their colleagues and everybody else engaged in these consultations to be able to share what has worked. So it would be great to hear from you all, not only on inclusive early warning systems, but any other aspect of gender responsive disaster risk reduction, including perhaps as a focus for a future expert webinar. So I will stop here as I know we would really like to save some time for discussion. So thank you all for your attention, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. And now I am going to open the floor for questions and answers, or just some comments if people have comments. So please do send them through on the Q&A panel, or I think you can raise your hand as well.
And feel free to turn your cameras on so we can see each other, for those of you who are able to turn your cameras on.
Ilan, you have your hand up, you can go ahead.
Yeah, in the absence of anyone else, I mean, I'd love to hear from our attendees, but in the absence of anyone else, I wonder, I mean, wonderful to hear from the two other speakers. I wonder, what can we offer you from universities? What do you need from scientists? What are we doing that actually isn't serving you or maybe undermining you, really? We're here to help. What can we offer? Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan. Does anyone want to? Yeah, Rahel, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. And I mean, it's interesting because for another event that is taking place later on today at UCL, I recorded a video last night, and I was thinking, what is it really that is most important in this space? And I think, I mean, one of the most critical things, and you've alluded to it, Ilan, is that we all come together, because by ourselves we are just covering one piece. What we're struggling with, and I think it's unfair to ask academia to solve it by themselves, but certainly, and it's known to you, it's just the collection and analysis of sex, age, and disability disaggregated data, you know, this entire baseline that would allow us to more easier define exposure and vulnerability in a gender specific manner. That is critical, and we struggle so much with that. We don't have in most countries gender responsive risk assessments. We struggle because we don't have a baseline with gender responsive post-disaster needs assessments. That has strong implications also for the recovery process. If we don't have gender responsive disaster needs assessments because of the lack of baseline, then it is very difficult to make the case why certain gender inequalities need to be addressed in the recovery process. And it's interesting, I had a meeting with the World Bank a few weeks ago, and they looked at post-disaster needs assessments data from the last 20 years. And of all post-disaster needs assessments, the highest amount ever allocated to gender in the recovery process was 2.9%. That's the highest amount. Most of them are below 1%. I'm talking about the entire recovery budget, but that's where we stand. And when one looks at the number and variety of gender dimensions of disasters that are being highlighted as part of gender responsive post-disaster needs assessments, it's interesting how since 2014, approximately every year, there's more and more gender dimensions that are being identified and articulated. So that means that we are still at the very beginning of understanding what gender responsive disaster risk reduction means, what the gender dimensions of disasters are, what the impacts are. I'm talking here not just about loss and damage, but actually the longer term consequences when it comes to gender in the post-disaster phase. So all of that, I think, is something where we rely on academia in many ways to help us bring that forward. And now, because I also had a question, if you don't mind, I have a question to Erica. Erica, I worked at UNEP in climate change for many years, as you know, and just like in WMO at UNEP, here we're talking about a society mainly composed of engineers that are working in this space, and many of them look at the solutions in terms of technology and so what Ilan has alluded to in terms of, well, early warning systems are very much about integration, inclusion, and intersectionality. That's not necessarily something that, that comes so easily to these engineer minds. You are a focal point on gender also at WMO. How do you bring gender closer to the discussion within WMO?
Great. Thank you so much for the question, Rahel. And maybe I'll also respond quickly to Ian's as well. So I think in terms of academia and the partnerships we do have, and maybe if you're not already engaged, WWRP or WCRP, I think the social dimensions that you've referred to are really important. And I think somewhere where we really look to academia and partners to help us address. So I think as you know, the Early Warnings for All initiative is kind of like 4 pillars, and bringing the partners together, it's actually a different approach to working together on some of these key challenges. So I think that within that space, you know, some of the decision context that Ilan mentioned is so relevant to like the design of early warnings. So I think it's important to have that in mind. And, you know, especially I thought the tornado example was a really fascinating one in terms of more or less like the ideal time frame that one would need to deliver a message. So I think all of those things are so important that we kind of harvest and consider that. So maybe I think from academia, if you're not already involved in WWRP or WCRP, there's like a social research element or initiative going on within those that help us define that, and how we kind of work with our partners to make warnings more people-centered. All of these things are really important in terms of academic background and kind of the lens. I also think that one of the challenges that many countries face, because we're seeing kind of cascading effects of, you know, there's an initial event and then that cascades into, you know, like a flood, or, you know, maybe it was there was a tropical cyclone and then this becomes a flood. And I think the governance of the multi-hazard early warning systems in countries themselves is something that would benefit from a bit of research. So I'm working with some of like the universities in South Africa on this. I think that yeah, I think really, and this is now responding maybe more towards Rahel's question, in terms of like the gender lens, it's true, like WMO has a very specific mandate, and you know, in terms of what our mandate is, we really are tasked to detect, you know, and install and provide guidance around observations and monitoring, analysis, and forecasting. But I think where we have a lot of the potential for interaction and embracing more the gender lenses around impact-based forecasts and warnings. So this is something that we know that we are needing to move more towards, and it's not something that is you know, often very easy from our community, and that's why we really rely on partnerships, you know, with UN Women, UNICEF, all of these other entities that are contributing really to Pillar 4, and IFRC also, who's leading it, to provide that contextualized information and identify kind of some of the needs, so that we provide more effective warnings. And I think that in terms of concretely, I mean, I'm quite myself very like vested and interested in this leadership training, because I think that having more women leaders would kind of easily translate towards, or I hope easily translate towards, more inclusive early warning systems from this perspective. So I hope that answers your question, and just look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you, Rahel, Ilan, Erica. I am gonna. Oh, yeah, Ilan, thank you for answering those two questions. If the other panelists also want to have a look at them and add some more information to the questions that Kathleen Kissy asked on the Q&A box, then please go ahead and do that. I'm not going to say them out loud because we are coming to the end of the session. So before I hand over to Rahel for the closing remarks, I wanted to say that to the participants, in the Women's Resilience to Disaster Knowledge Hub, we have an expert register and a community of practice to keep up to date with kind of the latest research and the latest information of like on gender responsive disaster risk reduction. I'll pop a link in the chat in a minute, but if you want to, oh, there it is, Priyanka just put it in. If you want to get in touch and sign up, please go there. So experts have the possibility to write blogs, share case studies, publications, tools, and an event like this one. So it'll be on the hub, and we will also share it with the community of practice. So I invite any of you here today who may be interested to join the network and submit a request form. And now I'm going to hand over to Rahel for some final closing remarks before we close off the session.
Thank you so much, Maria. And I do want to pick up just quickly Kathleen's question. And sorry, I must admit, I was looking at the chat and not at the Q&A section here in Zoom. But I wanted to say to which extent this is a really important topic, the sex-age disaggregation. And we are aware, many of us are aware that there's a lot of that data at community level, local government level, which is simply not being channeled upwards. It's sometimes an issue of systems, and it's sometimes also an issue of just not being aware how very important this topic is. UN Women, with a few additional partners, is currently working on, we hope, a meaningful and practical guide to help address this topic as well. And Kathleen, we will actually contact you on this one, if you don't mind, so that we can also work together with you on this. Now, with this said, very quickly, closing remarks. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Carina, Ilan, Erica, and Priyanka for your inspiring and excellent interventions. And also, Maria, thank you for your fabulous moderation. And thank you, dear participants, for your participation. And those of you who have provided some thoughts, thank you for that. This was an excellent opportunity to come together and celebrate, commemorate International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction on such an important topic. And I retain particularly how we have to continue to keep the complexity of inclusivity in mind, how everyone needs a voice and an ability to act, and the importance of learning from each other, and with that we mean all parts of the society. And I retain how we need to keep emphasizing that warnings are a social process as well, which needs to focus on intersectionality, inclusion, and integration, so that warnings can serve everyone. And the potential of the Early Warnings for All initiative is in this context also evident. We need to promote people-centered approaches on early warnings and ensure to reach and involve particularly the most exposed and vulnerable, including, of course, women and girls and the LGBTQI+ community. But not only these, we are aware of all of the minority and marginalized groups, and many of those are mentioned as part of the Sendai framework. Lastly, the Gender Action Plan for the Sendai framework that is currently under development is certainly also one way to involve the gender community more meaningfully in disaster risk reduction. And the plan will be to shape in this context also early warning systems for all. So we look forward to working with all of you on intersectional, inclusive, and integrated early warning systems. And we thank you for your participation. Have an excellent day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.